So yeah, focusing in on the marriage and keeping it strong. And I think being grounded in Christ and being committed to each other, no matter how tired and hard you're pressed, it's really important. Because when something comes your way, when two are rowing the boat in the same direction, it's going to go a lot better.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on the journey from millions to billions. We believe the key to scaling and compounding your wealth starts every single day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Each and every show, we have some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires where they share their insights, wisdom, and secrets with us. So we can learn how to be better stewards with our wealth, and we can scale even better. And also we can give more, all of it away. My name is Brett Swartz, and I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of Overland Park, Kansas area. He's an attorney, and we're going to be talking about family, mission, vision, values, and estate planning, and some other unique things today. Please, we can dive right into the show. Please welcome to the show with me, Brent Kellenberger. Brent, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Brett. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Sometimes my name gets confused. They want to add the N. I wonder sometimes if they want to take the N away from your name and call you Brett. What do you think?
Yeah, that happens for sure.
So for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your focus before we dive into the topic?
Yeah, so the story's certainly too long for the whole thing, as it is for all of you as well. But abbreviated version is I actually went to 6 different elementary schools as I circled Lake Michigan. And then after that journey in 5th grade, we moved to Kansas City. I've been in the Kansas side, Overland Park area, which is part of Kansas City. And I've been here really for the most part ever since, with 1 year in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm married to Beth for 25 years come June 11th and have 5 wonderful children. And we had a hard time having children at first. And so we're just very thankful for the 5. And the last one was quite an experience. My wife almost died, but the Lord was gracious. She pulled through, and the doctor said, I would strongly advise that you don't have any more children. So we are glad to be serving him here in Kansas, and I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's so relevant to everybody, whether you're rich, poor, or somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely. Let's dive right in, right? So family, mission, vision, values, and the importance of estate planning and getting everything in the right order. I think, oftentimes it seems like the mistake, Brent, is people want to just start with the tax planning or want to just think about paying for education, right? Or, some of the more just financial parts of it, which is definitely important, right? But let's start with, you're sitting down with somebody, they're worth somewhere between $5 and $50 million, and they haven't done any major estate planning. Talk about the importance of starting out with family, mission, vision, values before they dive into the other parts of it.
Yeah, many of you are aware of the phrase, begin with the end in mind. And when we pray first, which is the sign I'm looking at on Brett's desk, and really ask God for help and wisdom in the estate planning process, we really want to start with, where do I want my family to be in, 40 years, but also in 400 years? And this is really a critical question that guides the nuts and bolts estate planning that we do, because we want to make sure that as we think through these various roles that people are going to play and what they're going to get and when and how, and that we really start with the why, and then we work into the how and so forth. So the order of things is important, and really establishing in our family this idea that we have a mission, we have a vision, these are our values, is really critical to lay down a foundation for estate planning rather than the other way around.
Yeah, 100%. I recently had a chance to go through with one of your colleagues, Bill High, right, and such, and sit down and really dive into this entire world where I've been in tax and wealth and I guess finance and real estate my whole life, but I hadn't quite heard and even really thought of in detail or with any kind of intentionality what you just said there, right? So it sounds like A, where do I want my family to be, not just in 40 years, but 400 years, and B, starting with the end in mind and establishing like we have a family mission, right? And we have these gifts and these talents and this treasure, and what does it mean to be a family that stewards this capital and passes it on for generations for impact for our family, but also for others. So talk about just the mindset shift that people need to take here, and then start to walk through the questions that you asked to establish some of this.
Sure. So we actually went through one of those workshops together, Brett, and it was a real blessing to be able to think through this stuff. And so the first thing that we usually hit on is a family mission, and that's a pretty straightforward concept, and it shouldn't be very difficult. I think it's important that young children can grasp this at some level and then learn it as we live it out, through the years that they're young and into their adulthood. And so it could be something as simple as ours, which is to be about our Father's business, which is what Jesus said in the temple when he was 12. But there's a whole host of great mission statements out there, and it's really family dependent. And then to have this big God-sized vision, something that you really can't ever accomplish, uh, but something that you're really reaching for, striving for. And so ours is a little on the long side, but just something that kids can memorize and that's catchy and that they can also grasp and understand. Sometimes a picture is good to go along with it. So ours is blessing, honor, glory, and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne and unto the Lamb forever and ever. Comes from Revelation, also comes from Handel's Messiah, if you've gone to that. So that's a vision, an example. And then values, really diving in. You want about 4 to 6, maybe 7 at the most. And again, something that kids can grasp. Things like honesty, integrity, diligence. And a lot of families with a business background that have worked hard and have an estate that is significant. Diligence is often a part of that, but we always want to make sure that we work some values in there that maybe are even more important than diligence, like the underlying integrity that the Lord blesses. Uh, Things like love, charity, those kind of things, so that we're not overlooking our fellow man on the way up the ladder, so to speak. So these kind of things are important to have laid down, in my opinion, before. Now, most people come back afterwards and start doing that stuff later, but it's great if you can do it before the nuts and bolts.
Yeah, and Brent is exactly right. Everything you're saying, I couldn't agree with you more. And Brent helps people set up living trust and avoid probate and do legacy planning and think through all of these things in a thoughtful, intentional, legal manner. And so, yeah, family mission makes sense, right? Something that is going to be able to be a part of the family living out, as well as something that the kids can grasp at an early age. And then setting that vision that's going to pull you in that direction, right? Pull you to something much bigger than just your family, or just, you're always in John Maxwell says, well, you don't want to be just in a goal mindset. You want to be in a growth mindset, which growth is you continually grow. You don't just arrive, right? And so this God-sized vision is going to keep pulling you in that direction, something to continually strive for. You're not going to just arrive when the family's worth X amount of millions of dollars or billions of dollars or whatever. It's like, these are eternal things that are going to pull you to something even bigger. And then the values, right? I love the way you simplifies that. 4 to 6. Yeah, our core values for our family were, Bible, family, stewardship, grit, and impact, right? We had narrowed it down to 5. Talk about the importance of sharing the values. I'm curious, like, in what order, right? We kind of thought that out a little bit. I'm wondering, when you guys chose your values, did you have them in a certain order, and then did you talk through how how they can build upon one another?
No, we really didn't put them in a certain order, but as I think about it, I would say they certainly um, they certainly flow in that way. Ours kind of is an acronym of um, Be His Story. So BHISS, Be His Story. And it stands for Bible, humility, integrity, service, and then story. And so those things, they do build on each other. I mean, the Bible seems foundational. Obviously, humility and integrity. If you can have those two things, you're going to do well and you're going to be able to receive an inheritance, whether it's large or small, and use it wisely and know how to use it if those values have been instilled through the years by parents and grandparents. And so then that leads us to service, where the purpose of life isn't to have this nest egg where we're protected and we're safe and we always can fall back on our money, because then we could lose our trust in God. So really the point that we want to bring our children to, in our family at least, is that we're looking outward. We're not thinking about ourselves and our safety, but we're going out of the secure zone and we're serving others. Sometimes that maybe isn't that scary, but sometimes it can be really scary. It can be God-sized vision type stuff. So, and then that leads to stories. So, I'm glad you brought that up, because I just realized that it kind of does flow in an order there.
Yeah, spot on. I love that. I love the way you broke that down and you kind of did that on the fly there. I'll share mine with the audience as well, and kind of how we talk about it with our family. And by the way, this involves regular family meetings about once a week, where we're reviewing our values, we're seeing how we lived them out, we're celebrating, some key wins. We're talking about, what the individual, starting to work towards individual values as well, and then how we can help each other achieve those things for each of us. Because like Brent, my wife and I, Melanie, we have 5 children. And so we, ages, 6 at this point at the youngest, and then 14 to the oldest. And so we're being very intentional about this now, and it's coming to life as we're going here. And so ours are Bible, and that's foundational, right? And by the way, when we were going through this whole exercise, it was interesting, Brent, because there's probably, 10 or 12, like, that we really, really want it, right? But we had to narrow them down. We had to be strategic. You don't want too many, so you don't really, it's hard to remember them all. And you also don't want to take out the ones that are key, but we had to strategically. I remember working with Bill saying, these are kind of the same one. Can you pick one and then make it that? You're like, okay, that makes sense. But for us, Bible was key and foundational, right? That's where everything starts, with our relationship with Jesus and what we've been called to do, the work the Lord's called us to do in our life. So that's the Bible. That's our guidebook. That's our foundation of our entire life and our values. And then it moved to family, which is like, hey, we're here to also love each other, right? And build each other up, and to, we're first responsible for our family, right? So this is the core family, the traditions, the connection, the love, the service. And then it was stewardship. So if we're doing those first 2 right, then we can move into stewardship. And stewardship is taking the gifts we've been given, right? And then being a blessing and impacting, moving outwards, right? So now we're starting to move even more outwards. And then we moved into grit. And the way we defined grit was the basically like holy fear of obeying the Lord, right? Even when it's hard, even when it doesn't necessarily make sense. It's the idea of standing below in submission to the Bible, right? And what the Lord wants us to do, even when we don't get it all right. It doesn't necessarily, we don't necessarily have all the feelings or the understanding. It's like, no, we're going to trust. That's what grit is, like, pushing through to obedience. There's a whole book that we read called The Awe of God on this, by the way, which is pretty cool. The other thing I said, if you can find a book for each of the values that you can go through as a family, that also helps to bring this to life. And the last one was impact, right? And we said that impact happens, I don't say it's completely automatically, but it's naturally going to happen if you do the other 4, right? If you're living foundation with the Bible, if you are loving and taking care of your family, if you're stewarding the gifts you've been given, if you're obeying in holy fear even when it's tough, and then now, boom, you're going to make an impact in the world. It can't help but to have that kind of fruit. And so that's kind of the way we strategically teach this to our children and try to practice it, and it helps to keep the momentum going. And that's kind of the idea. Any other core ways that you're doing momentum with family meetings or annual retreats yet, or any, kind of ideas that you and Beth have come up with so far?
Well, we have a designed picture board that it's pretty good sized and it's going on the wall. It hasn't come yet, but it's all designed. And so just at family meals, which we're 4 years ahead of you. Our kids youngest is 10, oldest is 18. So we're right in there, just 4 years ahead for the five kids. And boy, once they get to start driving, you'll find out in a year or two, they get jobs, which is a good thing. But a lot of times those jobs are like fast Chick-fil-A, for example, and they're gone for dinner. And so whenever we are sitting down for dinner, which might only be 3 or 4 nights a week, we're going over these things when we do our devotionals, and just trying to get them cemented into their minds for right now. But a retreat, we're planning a vacation to Zion. Well, not Zion. We're hoping to hit the 5 Utah national parks, and as we do that, this is our first big trip since we've solidified this stuff, and I'm hoping that um, I might even come up with a little value devotional for each of the national parks, and we'll do it when we're at some peak or in the Narrows or something.
Absolutely love it. I just want to encourage everyone who's listening to just a little bit of intentionality goes a very long way, right? A little bit of consistent intentionality compounds. Like these family meetings, and Brent just said, well, like cementing it into their minds. Like children are such, the younger they are, the more they're going to absorb. I think something like 80 or 85% of all of the habits kids form before they're 16, some stat like that, right? Where it's like in your entire life, like, and so how important it is, even if it's, 30 minutes, once a week, right? 15 minutes, or taking, 10 or 15 minutes on a family dinner to go through these things. I know when we're driving on the way to church, it's about a 20-25 minute drive. And I have like a devotional book, or I'm having them watch a little mini video, and I'm talking about some core value or some leadership concept or something the Lord puts put on my heart. Like there's places you can do this if you just have these goals set out that you're looking at, that I want to cement into my kids' minds the core values, and I want to celebrate when they're doing these things, and we want to do it for our family too. Like so a little bit of intentionality goes a long way, and it doesn't have to be so overwhelming, right? It really can be something that is practical and is in the day-to-day or week-to-week type of rhythms. So I like that idea, Brent, of doing devotionals for the five parks, thinking through it, having a plan, and then just executing on that plan. I think that's honestly, it's like that's 80% of the battle. If you just, I'm gonna plan it out, I'm gonna give a little bit of thought, give some prayer towards it, and then just show up and do it, versus just going on the fly, right? Which is so easy when you have so many kids and business and all the things, and you're just, it's like, but if you just took a little bit of intentionality. So talk about other ways that you're disciplining, or you're staying disciplined within that. Brent, any other tips or things that help you to stay disciplined?
Well, I think what you said, Brett, is spot on. I think about where we live, and we live out in the country. By choice, we moved out there about 3 years ago, and so we drive a lot because we're always driving into the city, and we spend that time. Well, we try to, and sometimes we do spend that time with intentionality, because just 10 minutes having the kids dig out the Bible and read some scripture, go back and review stuff you've already memorized so that so you don't forget it, and praying with the family. This stuff it's easy to do on the road, and it's easy to veg out and do nothing or let the kids pop their earbuds in, but make them take them out for a few minutes. And I don't think it has to be a long discourse on, the Sermon on the Mount. Most kids are probably not going to do well with that. But just the 5, 10, 15-minute stuff, it's huge. So I'm glad to hear you do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. One other tip I think we've implemented pretty good. I need to update the whiteboard, but I have a full on big whiteboard that we bought that rolls around on the wheels, and we have it right in our living room, and we have like a verse that we're all memorizing together, and then we have the family values, we have the family mission statement and the family vision statement, right? And it's just right there, and every single day they can see it and look at it, and that helps, right? And then at dinner time talking about it. These are just some tips that you could think about. I'm also thinking like the vision the crest. Like he talked to us. So Bill talked about creating like a family crest. It could be like a compass. It could be like a lighthouse. Basically, it's kind of like I don't know if it's a family logo is the way to think about it, but something where you have, and then you can create like a word, like a piece of art on the wall that has like, if it was like a shield as an example, that could be the crest. And then on the four parts of the shield, you have your four core values, right? And then you could post that on the wall. And so, I mean, you just think about those kind of things that can help to cement and remind everybody of what the family mission statement is, what the vision is, what the values are, and all of those things matter, right? Because we're bombarded with so much information these days from all these other places that want to instill the world's values, the world's desires, and all the things that are just bombarding our children. We've got to be proactive with these things in the power of prayer to cement it into their hearts and their minds. Otherwise, the mistake becomes you don't do it. Kids don't have it. They get the wealth. They don't necessarily get the core values passed on. They don't really have a plan or intentionality for it. And they still have some of the core values, but they didn't have the framework. They weren't trained. I mean, Bill talked about the ability of training the children, right? And training the kids, not just the core values of instilling those. That's obviously the most important, but the training. So talk about the training aspect, and let's get into a little bit of the living trust and probate and how you help clients set everything up.
Yeah, that's a great segue. There's a lot of different analogies we could look at, but one of the ways I like to look at estate planning or just passing on wealth in general is is flint and steel or flint and kindling versus fire. And so if we look at an estate or wealth that we're passing on as fire, we know that fire is obviously really valuable. We can cook with it, we can stay warm with it. It's life-giving. And if somebody comes along on a hiking trail and they need fire, uh, it probably wouldn't make much sense as they carry on to give them some big piece of wood that's flaming because they're going to end up, lighting themselves on fire or somebody else, or it's going to go out in the rain or whatever it is. So passing on wealth is a lot the same. It doesn't work to just plop that wealth into your kids' laps, really at any age, but certainly not when they're less than 40 years old because they haven't had much experience. But what we want to focus on is is the flint, and the kindling. And if you can really teach a child how to make fire, how fire safety, these kind of concepts with wealth, then they've got it with them and it's safe. They can take it wherever they need to go, and it's more of a tool that serves them well for their entire life instead of something that could burn the house down. So that's just one analogy that I think kind of helps people start to realize that we really need to train the next generation. Getting back to the word you used, Brett, we need to not only instill these values, but just train them and so that they know how to start the fire, so that we don't just give them the fire. And, you know, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, no, spot on, Brent. I couldn't agree with you more. And practically speaking, I mean, this is part of why we also our core value of our family that we practice is as a part of the stewardship, right? Is homeschooling our children. We've been able to do that so far, so good, and I mean it's been amazing actually. And being able to get hands on and have the kids be a part of the business, right? And start to do videography and started to do, travel and go to conferences and go on trips that it opens their, their world to the rest of the world, right? And missions trips and business trips and everything else in between. And so, but also like training them on thinking, right? Strategically, thinking with the stewardship mindset, thinking and growing in their leadership and their personal development and their physical and health and all of these things, and of course their spiritual development with the Lord and building that relationship. All of these things make a huge difference. And then training them in the actual, financing and budget and investing and saving and giving and spending and all of those things and negotiating. I mean, we even part of what we've done with our children is we don't pay them an allowance. In fact, they earn commissions, right? We also don't have them just do a bunch of chores that are just mandatory, although for their personal space that is mandatory for their personal space. But for the general living expense or living for the family place, right? Especially with 5 kids, our strategy has been, if someone cleans the garage, this is what the commission is. Somebody, cleans the backyard and takes care of the dog and all the stuff that the dog's doing in the backyard gets a commission. And someone who's folding the laundry and doing it in a very efficient way is going to get this commission. And these are commissions, and that's taught them to naturally negotiate, because then all of a sudden we say, hey, who wants this? Who wants this gig? Who wants to get this commission? And they say, well, how much is it? Right? How much am I going to get paid? And it's a back and forth. And all of a sudden I'm like, they're becoming expert negotiators through the practical ways of doing this. And so these are just some of the strategies that we've implemented on training the next generation on doing that. And so let's talk about the living trust and the importance of it, right? As a reminder for everybody, like, why do you get a living trust? What is probate, and how important is it if you don't have it to get it right now?
Sure. We'll start out with what is probate. And probate is the process by which a will goes through probate court, and the judge oversees that process. And there's a lot of paperwork filed and attorneys involved. And then the assets get transitioned through that process from the deceased person to their heirs. And so that process, it varies by state, but it can be fairly complex. And around here, if you can get through it for under 3,000, you're pretty lucky. And it takes time. It takes someone else's time, your executor, and it takes 6 months. Again, it can be a lot longer than that, but you're lucky to get done in 6 months. So that's usually something to be avoided. It's also public, so anyone with a larger estate is not going to want anybody to be able to go to the courthouse and look at all those public records and find out that your children, you had 2 kids and an estate of 20 million, and so now they have 2 people out there that are in their 20s or 40s, it doesn't matter, and they know that they're targets now. They want to hit them up they'll actually get things in the mail sometimes. So anyway, trusts avoid probate. If you utilize them correctly, you can have everything in your trust when you pass away, or shortly after you pass away, it will be in your trust, so that nothing goes through probate and everything's privatized. So it's like a privatized probate, and it's much more streamlined. And I would say that's a big advantage of a trust, but there are more. Probably the biggest advantage, in my opinion, is the ability to really build a trust that reflects your mission, vision, and values and the ongoing nature of your family, because families are meant to be generational. And so you want this trust to, for example, be Flint and Kindling and not fire. So you wouldn't leave everything to a 21-year-old or a 25-year-old, which is what I frequently see. And some of my clients will say, well, my 21-year-old is really responsible, or my 25-year-old, he's already saved up for whatever, a new car. And that's great. but there's more to it than just being responsible for your own age. Experience is critical. Wisdom grows over time, and so it's not just if they're a good saver or not. And involving other people in the process through time is really important. A lot of families will put into their planning not just their mission, vision, values, but they'll put safeguards in there so that the money is more likely to be stewarded according to those mission, vision, and values.
Yeah, spot on. I love all of that. The other way I've heard put it as well is, you don't want to steal your kid's fight, right? Giving them so much too soon at certain ages, like you're kind of robbing them of their fight. You're stealing their opportunity to build and persevere and that grit and that 20 to 30, 30 to 40. I mean, that's all huge formative years for a lot of what they're going to have to struggle through, and hopefully in a good way, struggle in a very positive way that helps to grow their character. And you don't want to steal their fight. And so there's wisdom in having a trust in place that has boundaries and parameters and guardrails, so that the stewardship of the wealth, and the wealth more than just the financial part of it and the tax part of it, but the giving, the mission, vision, values, right, and a well thought out trust, working with someone like Brent to establish that and get all of those things in place will help to be kind of like the constitution of the family, right? And the constitution is how and where, what we believe, and how and where we want to make a difference in this world and for our family. And the best families that have been able to pass multi-generational wealth for decades and decades, and over all the years, have that mindset, right? More than just, oh, how do I, get a stepped up basis on a 1031 exchange and my kids walk away capital gains tax free. That is so temporary, right? Versus the huge, big, eternal type of focus. Like, how do we have this to be where our constitution of our family would live out in such a way that it would not stop, right? It would, for hundreds of years, we can continue to be being great stewards with the capital and the wealth that makes a difference for our family and also for MVPs, most vulnerable people. What do you think, Brent? Anything else to add to that?
No, that's all spot on, Brett. And I would just say that we typically will build protection into these trusts so that the children literally can't, lose the money if they experience a divorce or a lawsuit or have other creditor issues. Life definitely throws us curveballs. And so we'll usually put a significant protection. And then at some point, we might not make it mandatory anymore. The protection isn't mandatory. You can get whatever you want out of this trust and spend it however you want. But typically, that's going to be at an older age when they've had some ability to just gain maturity and wisdom.
Yeah, spot on. So let's talk just practically real quick, kind of a lightning round on this. So someone shows up, I mean, what, 5 hours of like thoughtful sit down work, this doesn't take that long. You need to think through some of it. But I mean, practically speaking, Brent, if someone dedicated 5 hours in the next 5 weeks, they worked with you, they could set this up, right? How simple is that?
Correct. Yeah, it really doesn't take that much time. I find that, when people are really ready, they can knock it out pretty fast. Typically,
Yeah.
we'll meet 2 to 3 times in a span of about 3 to 5 weeks and be done. And so it just depends what they're looking for. Obviously, there's simpler estates and more complex ones, but anybody in the 5 to 50 million range, which we certainly serve a lot of clients in that range, it's a good thing to take that 5 hours will get you a long ways.
Yeah. And then number two, what's the average cost? $2,500 to $10,000, depending on the complexity of it all.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in that range. I would say our average clients that don't get into a lot of mission, vision, values work, if any, are around 3 grand. And then folks who are doing the more in-depth dive and really thinking through the Flint and Kindling type method, yeah, double to triple that. So yeah, you're up to about 10,000 at the top.
Yep. Yeah, and probate, I think you were being generous with what it would cost. I've heard hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the size of the estate. I think you mentioned maybe 3,000. But I mean, if the estate's worth, I think I heard some stat, if it's worth $10 million, it's X percent, and it's like, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? From the cost and the time and the opportunity cost of the 6 months or however long it takes, where you could be earning interest and all the different things to associate it. So, $3,000 to $10,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to what you could be paying if you didn't set this up.
Yes, certainly it can get very expensive, especially with larger estates and more complexity. I've seen some pretty hefty prices on probate that far exceed the 3,000 for the simpler estates.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's the estate tax looming out there. Right now, it's not a problem for most people, uh, but certainly higher net worth folks, you get into the 20 million range for a couple and over, and you need to be keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah, just as a reminder, people, that's 40% death tax that the stepped up basis is not solved for. Right now the exemptions, with inflation is about 27, 28 million married, about 13, 14 million single. Those are set to expire in 2026. We'll see if the new administration extends that or changes that. But either way, you want to be thinking about what's my total estate worth and what would be the death tax or the estate tax, even with setting up a living trust. Because a living trust is not, remove it from the taxable estate. You need to find other ways, and Brent can also talk about ways to do that as well. Of course, we have what's called the Deferred Sales Trust Plus, that upon a sale of a highly appreciated asset, we can move all of the capital outside of your taxable estate without any charity, life insurance, or gifting required. It's an amazing strategy that can be a $100 million sale, and in one sale in one day, while you're still alive, you need to be alive, you need to be selling to a third party. We can utilize the DST Plus and have all of that 100 million outside of the taxable estate forever, and your children can be the beneficiaries of that. It also doesn't give up any of the life exemption amount that you might be gifting outside of that to your kids while you're still alive. Make sure you go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to learn more about that. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That being said, Brent, are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm ready.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you go back to your, let's put it to your 30-year-old self, what's the one gold nugget and make sure you tell yourself to do?
Ooh. I would say it's really important if you're married, to really focus on that marriage relationship, because in our marriage we've had some really tough things happen, and so a lot of people actually get divorced when they have a child that has severe disabilities and special needs. Our last child came home on a ventilator. He had a G tube. He had a trach, and it was a years long process. Um, you know, we're very thankful for where we are today, and he's doing fairly well. Really great considering, but that those were tough times, and we didn't always, you know, uh, we didn't always have, a really as strong of a relationship as I would have liked, but we were committed, and that pulled us through. And I think being grounded in Christ and being committed to each other, no matter how tired and hard you're pressed, it's really important. So, yeah, focusing in on the marriage and keeping it strong, because when something comes your way, when two are rowing the boat in the same direction, it's going to go a lot better.
Awesome. Great answer. Love that. Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
That I've recommended other than the Bible. No, there's so many good books out there. I mean, Gospel Patrons, I didn't even read the whole thing yet, but that's great. Treasure Principle is one of my favorites because it's short and it's really impactful. That's by Randy Alcorn.
Awesome. Question number 3, what are you most curious about right now?
Well, I am really curious to see how things play out with this administration, not just with the estate tax, which is obviously always on my radar professionally, but just in general, just to see the world's it seems to be very tedious right now, and it has been. And just to see if if there's going to be more big explosions or if we're going to really settle down.
Yeah, good question. Absolutely. That is curious. I'm curious about that too. Next question. Number one way you're using like Chat GPT or AI?
Yeah, so I am using it. I do ask, simple legal questions and sometimes more complex ones. I've had uh, chat. I do Copilot, and it's drafted some letters and memos for me, and it does pretty good. I definitely find that I can always make them better. So I don't personally, I don't feel like AI is that smart yet. Um, I know, I'm sure other attorneys take it and make it better too, but it does give a good starting point for me on a lot of things.
Perfect. Next question. Number one leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by.
Well, it really would go back to our family vision is really my personal, or my family mission is really my personal one as well. And to try to look at everything in, in that vantage point of, to be about my father's business. And so, do I always remember to do that in the heat of the moment? No, but stopping and praying is huge.
Fantastic. Hey, Brent, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And I want to thank you for the opportunity I got to spend one-on-one with you, or as a group with you. And that was about 20 couples, right? With Bill High in Florida. That was a lot of fun. And it's great to now have you as a strategic alliance to be able to send clients who are looking for living trust, especially in legacy planning, legal work. I would encourage you to keep doing what you're doing to help families across, build these things out, because it's so vital to have someone in your corner like yourself. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, could you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Sure. Our website is wlaw-group.com. And my email is similar, brent@wlaw-group.com. Phone number 913-706-2384. I practice law in Arizona, Kansas, and Missouri, but I am starting to do some consulting for folks outside of those states, even though I don't draft legal documents specific to Florida, for example. And also do certain charitable planning like charitable trusts for someone from any state.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brent, for being on the show. And I also want to thank all of our listeners again for listening or watching the Build It to Billions podcast. We are streaming on YouTube, by the way, if you can check us out there. We're also on Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast and YouTube channel as well. We will repurpose this content for those channels. We're on this mission with you to guide the successful entrepreneur and investor on their journey from millions to billions. And we believe, again, that the key to scaling and compounding your wealth and life starts every single day with the practice and mindset of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. I hope today you've caught some wisdom today from Brent and myself as we've explored a living trust, we've explored family mission, vision, values, and practical ways that you can implement it today with you and your family. Please take action today. Please share this with share this with someone who can be of major impact to. And of course, if you're selling a highly appreciated asset that has, huge gains, $1 million gain, $1 million net proceeds, business, Bitcoin, real estate, you can, of course, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We would love to help you build a capital gains tax exit plan so you can also be a great steward with that wealth moving forward. Appreciate everyone listening or watching out there, and we will talk to you again all real soon. Bye now.